finally here, which makes me so happy because I love fall, especially Halloween. So I hope wherever you are, there is something that is making you equally as happy right now. But for this video, I was going to jump straight into Chiari Malformation, what it is, what the symptoms are, treatments, the process of my diagnosis. So I'll just go ahead and start right at the beginning. So I was diagnosed as having a Chiari Malformation this year. So it's called an Arnold-Chiari Malformation, named after the person who first figured it out. There are several different kinds of Chiari Malformation, kind of different symptoms, different ways of presenting, different levels of severity. I have Chiari Malformation type 1. So what this is a condition where brain tissue extends into the spinal canal. So the bottom part of your brain is called the cerebellum, and it sits in your skull. There's an opening in your skull where the spinal canal is able to get spinal fluid to your brain. But for people with a Chiari malformation, the bottom part of the cerebellum is almost like falling into that canal, kind of blocking that canal. And this can lead to a lapse in spinal fluid being able to make it to your brain, which is extremely important. Your brain, for lack of more scientific explanation, your brain kind of is floating in your skull, and what's kind of keeping it there is the spinal fluid. So it's very important that CSF, spinal fluid, gets to your brain. So Chiari can either be asymptomatic, or you can have very, very severe symptoms. The symptoms range. My specific symptoms are I get very bad headaches, pressure headaches. If you've never had one of those, when I'm laying down, I'm totally fine, but if I sit up, there's so much pressure in my head because of the way the spinal fluid is, so it just feels like my head's about to explode. And going along with that is pain in my eyes. It feels like someone's squeezing my eyes like this, so to move my eyes up and down or left and right, I really just can't because it hurts so bad. You can get neck pain. I don't really think I have that. You can have trouble swallowing, which I am starting to develop that. You can have vision problems. You can have a reduced sensation to touch. So I've mentioned in another video, but my neurosurgeon at one of my appointments came around and poked me all over my body with the pointy side of a needle, and it just doesn't hurt. I don't really feel it. I also have a lower or lack of, I have a lack of some reflexes. I have a lack of a gag reflex. So there's a lot of different symptoms that can come along with Chiari. There are many more than what I just listed, so it really kind of presents differently for everyone. So Chiari can be something that you're born with. So maybe your skull is maybe small or abnormally shaped, and it's something you've always had with it. It could come after an accident, something like that. So there are a couple different ways of treating it. So if you aren't having symptoms, you might just be monitoring it to make sure it doesn't get to a place where it's blocking your spinal fluid. If you are having a lot of problems, there's a surgical decompression that they can do to kind of alleviate some of the pressure in your brain. So before I get to kind of the treatment of that, I wanted to go over how my diagnosis process went for that. So I found out I had a Chiari malformation when I was getting some imaging done for a spinal fluid leak. So for my spinal fluid leak, they did a brain to tailbone MRI, and on that we found the Chiari. So when I got my results back, I was very, not worried, but intrigued that it was there, because I had just seen a neurosurgeon, a local neurosurgeon, and I flat out asked him, is there any chance I have a Chiari malformation? Because I knew that they kind of go hand in hand with some of the other comorbidities that I have. And he was like, no, definitely not. I'm looking at your imaging. Nope, not there. So I was like, okay. And then like 2 weeks later, we found it on this other imaging. And when I brought it up to the doctor, he never brought it up. This is not the neurosurgeon. This is a headache specialist I was seeing, who ordered the brain to tailbone MRI. And so when I went back to follow up with him, I was like, I see that I have Chiari malformation. And he's like, yeah, it's no big deal. Like, you've probably had it forever. It doesn't matter. It's not causing your symptoms. All of your symptoms are because you had COVID. So I did have COVID in December. But according to him, everything that was wrong with me was because of long-term COVID effects. Yeah, so I had preemptively joined some online support groups for people with Chiari, and the one thing I've learned from them is that if you have Chiari, you cannot go to a neurologist. You cannot go to a neurosurgeon. You have to go to someone who specializes in Chiari, which is extremely frustrating because that is not financially or logistically feasible for everyone, to have to travel to these places, to go to people who aren't in your insurance. I mean, that's just that prohibits a lot of people from getting the care they need and deserve. So, in my opinion, if you're a neurologist or a neurosurgeon, you should be familiar with all things to do with the brain, including Chiari. So it's very frustrating that you have to navigate your way around to find care when you're in so much pain. But anyway, I went ahead and contacted one of the top Chiari specialists probably in the world, and he reviewed my imaging and paperwork and decided to take me on as a patient. So I've been seeing him for a couple months, and to backpedal a little bit, when I was still at my previous neurologist, the headache specialist, I fought back a little bit when he dismissed my Chiari as, I've had it forever, because I have had a neck and head injury. I've had several concussions. I have had my brain imaged many times throughout my life. So I was like, I've had brain imaging before. If I've had this forever, why has no one ever told me? And he was like, oh, they wouldn't tell you because, if you're a radiologist and you're looking for X, Y, and Z, you're not looking for a Chiari, so you wouldn't even mention it. Which, again, sounds a little bogus to me. If I was a radiologist and I saw someone's brain falling out of their skull, I would probably put it on the report, but I'm not a radiologist, so what do I know? But anyway, I had requested from him that I have tests done that would give us more information about the Chiari. So some of the tests you can have done, you can have and I hope I'm saying this right, CINE, I would call it a sign MRI. If I'm saying that wrong, I'll put the pronunciation down here. But this will show the CSF flow to your brain to see if it's blocked or not from the Chiari, which is a really important test. You can also do an upright MRI, which will show kind of what is happening in your brain when the weight of the world of gravity is on your brain. So you're sitting up for that, and I do have a video on an MRI that I had done, if you want to check that out to see what that process was like. So I had requested these images from him, these tests, and I was told absolutely not, and I quote, "We will not recommend any more imaging for you," which might be fair. I had already had, I would say, 8 to 10 images done by then, different tests, MRI, CT, X-ray. I probably would glow if you put me in the right light, so I kind of get saying no to more imaging, but it's not like I broke my leg. Like, this is my life on the line, so if I need to become radioactive to figure out what's going on, that's what we should do. So I was very upset leaving that appointment. In fact, my mom and I had driven 2 hours to it, so we stopped for lunch after, and I sobbed in the restaurant. It kind of felt like it was the end, because I was going into that appointment knowing that I had the Chiari, and I wanted the doctor to tell me the Chiari is the reason you're feeling that way. The Chiari is causing your problems. Here's what we'll do to fix it. And I got none of that. So I just was very, very disappointed and very upset, because I felt terrible, and the doctor was basically telling me, it's because you had COVID. There's nothing we can do. Take this medicine for a while. Yeah, so it was very upsetting, but I started the process to get into a Chiari specialist. I saw him several months later. When I was waiting in his office, my imaging was pulled up on the screen. He opened the door, and no longer did he open the door, did he say, and I quote, "Wow, you have one heck of a Chiari." So that, like, from that moment, I just felt so validated. And he basically did and said all the things that I already knew were true. That my Chiari was a problem, that it was causing my symptoms. He sent me for all of the tests that I had requested from my previous doctor, and we are moving forward on the path. So it's really important when you have chronic illness that you see the right doctors, and it's unfortunate that it is so prohibitive to get into them. This doctor, this specialist that I'm seeing, the one that is working with my Chiari malformation, is also the one who diagnosed me with CCI and AAI, and he doesn't accept insurance. So the visit was a pretty penny, and I'm very blessed that I was able to financially afford to see this specialist, but I know many people who wouldn't be. And to me, even if I never got treatment or alleviation of my symptoms, just going to him and him saying that you are sick, you are right, you should be feeling this way, just him validating everything I knew was worth every penny I paid. But in addition to that validation, he is working with me to treat my Chiari. So you can do just some monitoring of the Chiari to make sure, it's kind of like a cost-benefit analysis, like what are your symptoms versus the pain and what could happen from the surgery. But if your CSF is being blocked, if you have other concerning health things going on, you can move forward with a decompression surgery. So this is when they go in and they surgically remove part of your skull so that the cerebellum has a little bit more room, and your CSF can have a little bit more room to get through. So your skull, where that opening is called the foramen magnum. So they'll take it from, being like this to maybe being like that. So it just gives a little bit more room. If, depending on what your situation looks like in there, they can also do something called a laminectomy, which is where they surgically remove the back part of maybe your first vertebrae, again, to kind of relieve some of the pressure in the spine and brain. They also, I have seen some surgeons will cauterize, I hope that's how you say it, the cerebellar tonsils. So your cerebellum has these little tonsil-y things on the bottom, and they can kind of like electrocute them to make them shrink up. So that gives them a little bit, again, more room. So if you're ever in Chiari land and you hear the word tonsils, they're likely not talking about your tonsils, they're talking about your cerebellar tonsils. But anyway, for the decompression surgery, they go in through the back of your head and neck. They'll shave a little bit of hair down at the bottom, depending on what's going on. Your scar could be like this, or and it kind of looks like a zipper. So a lot of people who have had decompressions will call themselves zipper heads, and I've even seen some get a little like zipper pull tattooed at the bottom of their scar, which, if you gotta deal with this crap, like, way to like make light of it and make it as joyous as possible. So I think that is awesome. Decompression surgery is a major surgery. They're literally, right by your brain, removing part of your skull. So there is a good kind of down period after that. And there could be, depending on what your doctors say, some prohibited activities after. So I will be having a decompression surgery later this year. And with my decompression, they'll be doing a craniospinal fusion where they'll fuse my skull to my top of my spine. Which I'll do a video on later, but honestly right now I'm still researching and understanding, so I don't want to make a video before I completely understand what will be happening. But I know after my surgery it's kind of a no-no to be like on a roller coaster or a speedboat or, things where it's going to be a lot of motion. So I think a lot of that is because of the fusion, but I have seen some people say their doctors recommended them not do certain activities, either with a Chiari or post-decompression surgery. I do want to note that decompression surgery is not a cure. You will always have Chiari. The decompression is just kind of a way to alleviate symptoms. I know people who have had several decompression surgeries. I know people who have had several decompression surgeries and still don't feel good. So once you have Chiari, you will always have Chiari. So I do believe Chiari might be hereditary. When I just looked it up, it says that they can't necessarily say it's genetic, but it is a common thing in families. So it may have a genetic cause, they just haven't really gotten to that yet. So that is something that I'm worried about. I have a 2-year-old and I didn't know about my Chiari before she was born. So yeah, I'm really hoping that this is something that she never has to deal with if she has it. Praying more so that she doesn't have it. But yeah, kind of hard. I know like the pain that I'm going through and kind of the misery, so I would never want her to deal with that. So Chiari is not fun, but I know the people who have it are so strong to go through what they go through every day and during the surgery and during recovery. So yeah, Chiari warriors are a truly different breed, and I've felt so supported by them. It's kind of like a club that nobody wants to be in, but the membership comes with a lot of support and knowledge.